the night, let the time and right. Please fight of light, please align your sights, cause life will guide us. Into crisis which will ignite us. I'm taking flight. Lead jump, heat first, heat rush. He's been burst, we're being hurt, we're being cursed. Please keep up, no give ups. He's been inside to change your life, but first you're gonna have to change your mind. It's more complicated than be faking nice. I'll shine some light on some sage advice. Under the devil fight inside of me, who gets to speak to me on another level deep inside my dreams. A haunted frequency, fortune pedal, or unsettled. We all see what we want to see. I acknowledge that my will is free, but I promise you it wasn't me. God and the devil fight inside of me, who gets to speak to me on another level deep inside my dreams. A haunted frequency, fortune pedal.
Welcome, everyone, to another episode of the Enough to Keep Going podcast. Today is April 15th, 2021. This is episode number 188, and we are conducting our deep dive into gaming news for the month. So I am Swissguard, and I'm joined by my friends Agasicles Demas. How are you doing, Agasicles?
Hey, what's up? I'm just living life in the pit.
Aren't we all? And I also have Townmaster99 joining us.
Hello, everybody. I'm trying to crawl out of the pit right now.
Hopefully DB will be able to jump in soon as well. But yep, this is the deep dive, and we have for the last 14 days been compiling various stories that we've scraped across the gaming news interwebs, and some of them percolated to the top based on the preferences of your hosts, and we'll be discussing them today. Fortunately, there's some interesting industry news that has come out recently. I'm always excited to kind of have some Epic Store Steam talk. We have a little bit of the Apple. That whole story kind of faded from the fall, but recently in the whole Epic versus Apple lawfare going on, it came to light that according to the filing, Epic has lost around $181 million in 2019 and $273 million in 2020 for like these initiatives when they're going after Steam. So like paying the developer to either put the game out there on the Epic Game Store for free. They've been doing those free giveaways for a long time. Or those exclusivity deals, PC exclusivity deals, where like Control, for example, it's going to be exclusive. Well, I'm not sure if Control was permanent exclusive. MechWarrior 5, I think, was like a year-long exclusive for PC on the Epic Store. It didn't matter about the consoles, but it's not going on Steam. They have not broken through profitability on that front anywhere close yet. So, I think in like this, according to gamesindustry.biz, like Apple has actually said like they're not going to make any money at this rate till like 2027 or something. And Epic CEO Tim Sweeney countered like, on Twitter that it's a fantastic investment into growing the business. So, how long do you think Epic can continue to take all their Fortnite monies and kind of invest or burn, depending on your perspective, in their, attempt to disrupt like the, PC Steam Leviathan? We'll start with you, Agasicles, since you're a bigger PC gamer.
I'm gonna actually counterpunch a little bit on this, and not just you specifically, but more of kind of like the gaming media, and also kind of obviously gamer Twitter. Like, has anybody walked back a little bit to go, why is this even important to the Epic Apple lawsuit?
I was curious about that myself. Why Apple's worried about how profitable the Epic Store happens to be.
And my own thought, my own speculation, because I didn't dumpster dive into like some of these articles. I think what Apple is trying, the case Apple is trying to build is that Epic came after Apple, and DB is here scowling at me, so maybe he knows the answer to this question. It could be. My guess is Apple trying to build a case to say that, hey, the whole reason Epic came after us is because they're actually losing money on this other side of this business, and they were looking at us as the scapegoat to help them pull out of this nosedive that they put themselves in due to, poor management or whatever.
I think that that's part of it, right? I do think that there is some valuation going on here, and whether it is on the Apple end of showing why they're going after that money, or it's on the end of how much Epic has, not necessarily to lose, but how much Epic is invested in what they're already doing, and the cost of the Apple Store overhead is not significant. I mean, right? I think that there's multiple ways that they play this, but I think part of the reason that this comes out and is wrapped into this is that it has the potential to frame other financial pieces.
So, DB, if I could stand up in my chair and not get out of the camera frame, I would stand up and give you a standing O, because I wasn't actually expecting you to jump in off the top rope like that, but bravo, sir, for coming into the podcast cold and just popping right in there with the hot take.
That's a professional right there.
We all know that DB's the most professional out of all of us. Like, they let me host because they feel sorry for me. DB should be sitting here. But a companion story to this, by the way, like just to like really frame the funding here. Epic has Games Industry.biz has another story. Epic has closed a $1 billion funding round, 1 billion with a B, to support their long-term vision for the metaverse. They announced on Tuesday. The new investment represents less than 3.5% of the company, putting Epic's valuation at $28.7 billion. So, when you're looking at it from that perspective, just like ignoring the Apple versus Epic thing, when you look at it from like you're a $28.7 billion company, a couple of $100 million to like potentially disrupt like Steam. Yeah, I can see why Tim Sweeney like considers it an investment.
I mean, my question has been, to go back to your original question, right? I mean, regardless of the lawsuit, just simply like, what else are you going to do with all that Unreal money? Right? Because, investors at some point start clamoring about companies like building up truckloads of cash. Unless you're an Apple and you almost went out of business, and that's kind of why Apple's cash on hand stays pretty high, because culturally they still have a culture that remembers the need to potentially save themselves, right, in the event of like that much of a downturn. But one of the closest arguments to this that I think that the whole gaming industry should understand is the fact that console manufacturers invest millions of dollars in R&D for their next consoles and then lose money on the consoles for the first 2 years at least of the sale, and then usually in the third year they start seeing some of that turnaround. But then that's the console has to become profitable from a manufacturing cost perspective, but then there's still all the depreciation on the R&D that they have to make up for right over the long haul. So it seems like game industry to game industry, I don't know that it's that big a deal, kind of like you said.
I think for me, like the frustrating aspect, because like given the choice, I want to buy my games on Steam. Like I don't think I've hidden that fact. I completely understand Epic's desire to push into that space. I think the biggest frustration for me as a gamer is that the Epic Store has just remained pretty far behind Steam when it comes to just being like a hub for my PC gaming. there's just, it feels like there's a lot more features in Steam, just a lot more niceties. The Epic Store is fine for what it is, but it's still very Spartan, or rather basic. And I think that's kind of been my frustration.
Can-
It, like you said, it'd be nice to start seeing a little bit more bang for the buck, so to speak, if they're doing it. But then again, like, that money's going directly into games, and um, ultimately, what's more important, having a nice portfolio or having a fancy interface and a client. So if it gets the job done and they have a lot of games, then
Can,
that's great, right?
can,
It has to convert into sales at some point.
can we do this, DB? Or are we allowed?
I think so.
So years from now, people will liken this to the two barbers in the barbershop, right? Constantly arguing about Ali versus Liston, because this is an age-old battle between Swiss and I that continues to this day. I appreciate your perspective. I get it, and I definitely recognize the large body of PC gamers out there who probably feel the same way. Um, but if I have to pick a side, right, to launch this debate, I mean, so I guess one of the other perspectives that in the camp that I fall into is Steam. To me, as I've mentioned before, does what it does, but it is it doesn't do anything for me discovery wise. It's just like opening up that storefront is just a ton of noise, like blasted at me. I've been rewatching Arrow, so it's very much like the canary cry. Like every time I open that storefront, and I'm like, so I do all of my research, like on Metacritic and OpenCritic and every place else, and I figure out what I want for the most part. And then I go to Steam and I buy what I want, and then I close and get out. I mentioned a couple weeks ago, like that little like pop-up window that comes up. That I used to always like tab through that, the thing that pops up and it goes, you go next, and it shows you like 5 highlighted games or whatever. Like I don't even bother looking at that anymore. So I mean, so there's that. I mean, I personally, from in terms of its spending to position and it being disruptive, I think the Epic Store fills this weird space that is a little like Game Pass, kind of, in that it's just more helpful from a discovery perspective than Steam. Um, but from a monetization point, I think in where it's notionally helping developers, I think part of that storyline is the same storyline that Game Pass is. That for some studios who are able to benefit from it, they get a ton of cash up front. Epic foots that bill. There's a give back, sort of. I mean, you don't have to take it as an altruism, but if they're pocketing tons of cash like Scrooge McDuck, diving into his pile of gold coins for the Unreal Engine, then they're at least helping some developers out to the point of like they don't have to worry like where their next meal is coming from, or their game at launch selling a certain number of units before like they can start eating out again, right? So it's what I like is it's neat that there's just another planet in the macrocosm, right? And it's not just all Steam, which was becoming kind of this burgeoning, I'll use the word, kind of sort of monopolistic being, right, in the market space, and now there's something different.
Yep.
So spend that money, Epic. Get those exclusives.
No, I'm not that like. And all things considered, I'm not really that bent out of shape about any of it. I find it interesting. I find it interesting watching the money, because I'm wondering when it'll turn. Like it's kind of just the objective. Like, I wonder how long they'll keep operating at a loss.
Yeah, I've wondered the same thing. Not so much at a loss, but also thinking about just their revenue stream in terms of how sustainable that is, and what their plans are for that. And I think, and potentially, this is where, from a business perspective, you could say that the loss is acceptable, because what it is creating the potential of more engagement down the road, so that when Fortnite is not the biggest game in the world and a cash cow, that there are already people that are invested in this or potentially at least have some hooks in this infrastructure that allow us to continue to try to promote, engage, and monetize them. So I think that I could see where that chart in a boardroom sits somewhere.
DB, you're a resident economist. Sorry to drag this out just one more drumbeat longer, but um, is it acceptable for this to simply be a loss leader for Epic? Could this be like Amazon and they're like, I don't care if the thing loses money every year, right? The point is, like you said, right? It's to build that honeypot. It's to attract people to the store. It's to get Unreal Engine in developers' minds, and it's to build out that larger ecosystem of a large gaming center of mass and a gravimetric pull that brings people in.
I think it's possible that it's acceptable annual loss. It really becomes where their other revenue streams are coming from, and if they can sustain those or diversify those enough that this loss is acceptable. And that's potentially maybe even where the increased investment comes in, whether it's Sony like this story, or it's international investments and partnerships that also provides more ways to diversify their model so that this can be a loss leader.
Is Epic a publicly traded company? Do we know?
I don't believe so, because this is part of why they have the. I mean, I'll look it up as we move on to the next piece, but I'm almost positive that it's not, because we don't see
And Google confirms.
stockholder research.
Yeah,
Yeah,
company is privately owned.
and that's why they're having the investment rounds, is that they're not selling off more shares, which would be what we'd end up with to create capital, but they're having investment rounds in order to do the same thing.
And in that $1 billion investment round, Sony was 200 million. So speaking of Sony, I guess please.
Can I ask a question here, real
Sure.
quick? I'm sorry, since I didn't get to chime in. Not that I want to chime in on the finance side, because that's not my bag. But on the second story here, the 1 billion raised for the pursuit of the metaverse. Now, is this like? Do you think that that's for real? Like, they really want to create this, like, Ready Player One type of um, thing, I guess, this world, to have everything connected? Or do you think it's that specific as what they're trying to get, or are they just trying to get like all their games, like Epic's games, like kind of connected, and you can jump into, you're in Fortnite, and all of a sudden you like, say you're in the party mode, which is one of the modes in there, and you jump into like an arcade, and all of a sudden you're in Rocket League, and are they trying to get something like that? What do you think their ultimate goal is here, or is it just like blowing smoke so they can just go out and buy, Psionics and um, all these other companies, just so they can keep getting more companies and more money that way?
I think that's a good question. Up until today, I really thought it was just PR speak, right? Like, it is the idea of everything comes under a banner of Fortnite in some capacity at some point in time. But there was an IGN article today, earlier today, about kind of going into the metaverse aspect of this a little bit more, and how
Yeah,
much of
that's
this
why I was
is.
asking.
Yeah, right. How much of this is actually something. I'm more inclined to think that it is what you're proposing, Tao, in terms of they are just hooks within a variety of their games that link themselves back together. Not necessarily that it is one seamless interactive experience, but that there's enough, you know, in-game costumes and skins to your car that bring you back and forth between the different worlds that Epic has invested in.
I mean, I think it makes sense to like leverage your properties, right? So, um, any other last comments before we move off of the Epic Store?
My only last comment was it's curious, and I mean we'll just keep an eye on it. I wonder why Epic doesn't just become a publisher at this point. I mean, in addition to going after exclusives, which they've done a little bit of in the past, but I just kind of wonder why not at this point just start buying up studios. I don't know, just curious.
Maybe they will. All right, so we'll jump on to Sony, and Sony is a publisher, and there's a report on Gamasutra regarding their kind of strategic goals and how it's kind of rubbing some of their studios the wrong way. I think you want to take this one, I guess, because you want me to bump it back to DB. I think DB was the one that flagged the story anyway.
Yeah, no, I think this is this comes out of a couple different spots. It's initially out of a Bloomberg report in terms of Sony investing more in kind of the AAA narrative, blockbuster aspects of things, and then kind of the again, lots of rumors around all of this, right? There's some of this is the Jason Schreier Bloomberg aspect of rumors that are really confirmed later on. This comes off the heels of the rumor that Naughty Dog is working with Sony Ben Studios on a Last of Us remake. And then you kind of get also a couple tweets out there from longtime Ben Studio employees who have left the company around the same time as all of this is coming out. And again, this is not to say that correlation is not causation, but there is definitely the potential here that from a studio and a publisher from a publisher point of view, I can see why Sony is moving in this direction. That these are their big tentpoles, and if we look at the last couple E3s that Sony was at, this was their message that we have 4 big games, we have 3 big games, we have 1 big game. But from an individual studio perspective, that it also, I mean, they become, they become workhouses for these IPs more than they become creative avenues for game design development necessarily. And I think that potentially is and this is where I straddle the line on this, is that if this all lines up, like from a publisher point of view and a system moving discussion, I could see why Sony would invest in this, because this is what moves the needle in terms of people staying in the Sony infrastructure. But it also, it has the potential of limiting creativity from a developer, from a designer aspect. And whether or not we care about that, because there's other options like the Epic Store, is kind of where I kind of go, okay, well, there's other places. So, but that's the kind of, this is the outline here, is that it's not only that they're moving in this direction, or that they're reportedly moving in this direction, that here's an example of it with the Naughty Dog and Ben Studio remake of Last of Us, and the potential fallout from developers. Agassicles.
It's just weird. I mean, from my perspective, I feel like this isn't new. Like, it's like, this is not Sony is suddenly moving. Sony has been moving in this direction. When you go back over, particularly back into like the PlayStation 3 era, and we see droves and droves of like Sony Studios, if your game didn't make the numbers, then it was shuttered. I mean, there was a little bit less of that in the PlayStation 4 generation, but definitely in the PlayStation 3 generation. And what's kind of funny as we talk through this is, of course, Polyphony Studios just continues to do, pardon my French, like whatever the hell it is that they want to do. Like, I don't get that or understand it at all. But like, so I feel like this isn't new. I will agree that this is now a bit to the extreme in terms of, great Scott, have we hit the bottom of the creativity well? Like, this looks like what cable TV does, like in Hollywood does when they stop creating new IPs and just crank out remakes of everything. Even when they are vastly different than the original IP, they just slap that old IP label on it, out of fear of risk of doing anything new. It's just so yeah. So like I said, I feel like they've been moving in this direction for a while, but now in this generation, it's extreme. And it is in super stark contrast to what Microsoft is doing. Not saying that this is like a definitive like whammo all deal that Microsoft is winning the generation, but when all of the things that Microsoft is on from a bandwagon perspective is game preservation, giving you access to generations and generations old of previous games, expanding their first party studio base, and utilizing Game Pass not solely as a way to access those 2 billion additional gamers who don't own consoles, but specifically in, I can't remember the guy's name now, the guy who's the studio who's doing Psychonauts.
Double
Tim
Fine,
Schafer?
Tim Schafer. Yeah.
Yeah, it's specifically enabling things like Tim Schafer mentions, which is de-risking your development and launch so that you are enabled as a studio to take more creative risks. That is now standing in super harsh contrast to what Sony's doing. If this is the move that they are making, which again just starts to make them look like here's a new cable and here's old cable. Here's cable, right, and here's Netflix. In terms of original content. So I don't know. It's just interesting. Not saying that what Microsoft is doing has paid off or is proven by any means, but just saying that strategically those harsh differentiations in strategy are now even becoming more apparent if this is the deal that they're taking off on.
I think that I I agree with a lot of what you said, I guess, Cleese, and like when you were talking about like the creativity well, like that was also my initial reaction because they had The Last of Us remaster like not too long ago, right? I mean, so this is like it's not like this is the first time they're going back to mine that game. But yeah, it's it's definitely like presenting an interesting contrast because like for me looking at the industry and I'm not as uh I'm not as plugged in as you gentlemen when it really comes to like deep diving into the industry, but it was always Nintendo was over there doing their thing, you know, but then Sony and Microsoft like were going at it, but they seemed very similar. And then like as Xbox Live really took off and then Game Pass, um, you know, we started to see that differentiation, but like right now it's like really interesting to see the strategies diverge and what will come of it. I am not as pessimistic, I think, as a Gascles when it comes to like what Sony's doing, but I like their games and I'll be continuing to purchase them. So
This is what I was curious about. I was curious on where you landed on this, and not so much in the direction, because I can see that this direction has worked out well for you as a gamer. My
I
question is
I know that I am becoming more and more archaic by the day. Like I am not the future of gaming. Like I get it. I am like I love your cable analogy. Like, you know, all of our parents are probably still on their cable subscription. You have to like convincing them like, mom, you don't have to subscribe to DirecTV anymore. Like cut the cord. Like look at all the stuff we have access to and you don't my kids are going to be like, "Dad, why are you still buying a console?" And I know that's going to be me, but I don't know.
so the question I do have before we move on to the next topic is, this past generation, we had what, 2 new IPs from Sony in terms of first party hits, with, let's call them hits, right? With Horizon Zero Dawn and Ghost of Tsushima. We had other IPs like Days Gone that weren't quite hits. If this is the model that Sony's going to, what does it take for them to greenlight a new IP under this structure?
Well, and I think this is part of because Sony is so veiled. I mean, Microsoft. I feel like Microsoft hides its numbers, but we all know what the deal is. Whereas like Sony hides its numbers, and we have no clue. Right. One of the things that is concerning in the devil in the details behind this is, as far as we can tell, I think Days Gone sold fine. So I think I think part of this crankiness is Days Gone didn't do a lot for Sony in terms of its consumer cachet, with how much they're loved and critically regarded. Days Gone didn't win any awards, right? But numbers wise, I think it sold well, and I think the studio is bent out of shape because those sales numbers, they feel like, should justify their right to go on into Days Gone number 2. So it's just a weird mix where there's an inconsistency maybe in like what the yardstick was that was used to shutter other studios, and studios were told was their performance metric, and then having achieved that to then yet still be told, yeah, but you guys are just going to do backup for Naughty Dog.
Yeah, I wanted to. I was gonna actually kind of bring that up too, because like in that second article you had, they mentioned that it was Days Gone was profitable. So, and I was kind of thinking how this kind of goes back to I'll say Final Fantasy, Square Enix with the original Tomb Raider, where supposedly that sold millions and millions, but they're like, it was okay, but it was okay for us as far as a studio goes. It's like, what? I mean, what are they comparing it to? Are they comparing it to like a Final Fantasy? Well, like, yeah, it's probably not going to do those numbers, but I mean, I don't understand uh, how these companies, and I know maybe it's just because Sony's. It's kind of weird because I mean they're obviously doing very big numbers. They have been since PS4, and they're probably still doing it on PS5. I I I don't understand, and it's the same thing with Microsoft when they in the heyday of the 360, like where they start to suddenly just like buckle down on everything, and it's just like, all right, so we got all these hits, so that's all we're gonna just keep churning out, and it's like totally flipped, kind of like you were kind of mentioning earlier, I guess, Cleese, where it's first Xbox was up, or technically, I guess if you want to go back to the original to the PlayStation 2 and the original Xbox, PS2 was up, then that switched to the next generation, where Xbox was up and Sony was kind of down, and they eventually caught back up, and then it flipped again with the Xbox One and PS4, and then now it looks like it's going to flip again, maybe potentially. I mean, this generation's pretty early still, but it looks like possibly that will happen again, just because, like you mentioned, how Microsoft is doing all these things, buying all those companies, got Game Pass and just everything else that's going on. It just kind of seems like it just kind of bounces back and forth for some reason. I don't know if that's just change in management, maybe, and people obviously do things different ways. And I think Phil Spencer's been there for a while, but he obviously they were in different roles and stuff. So, and he just then this last generation became like the head of Xbox. But I don't know. Maybe it's just me just throwing my 2 cents in, and I don't know what I'm talking about.
Could be
I
like
don't know business stuff.
Could be like sports dynasties, right? Like it's very difficult to maintain that right over a certain number of years. While we've been talking about this, I go back to those previous generations where like significant studios were closed by Sony. And that which feels like, if this article is taken at face value, it feels like this constantly changing rubric, right? So blah, blah, Zipper Interactive was closed by Sony, right? The guys who made the SOCOM series, you know. And I last week when I was talking about the game Pacer, I kept saying Psygnosis. Not Psygnosis didn't make Wipeout. Studio Liverpool made Wipeout. Closed by Sony. Made Wipeout and like literally one of the few driving games on the PlayStation platform, the Formula One series. I also didn't re- realize that right off the top of my head. So and I want to say I don't know. I think there's some significantly more significant. I keep looking for like a list of studios that have been closed by Sony, but I want to say somebody made like a significant platformer back in the PlayStation 3 era that didn't make its numbers, and I want to say that they were shuttered as well. I can't remember exactly who they were, but but I mean, so to me, people always joke about, well, Microsoft acquires places and shuts them down. EA acquires places and shuts them down. I'm like, Sony grows studios within its own backyard and and shuts them down. Like, I feel like it's far more. And so I feel like I go back to again kind of in the vein of like Bethesda's recent misfortunes are exactly what they've been due for the last 10 years. This is kind of like, this is a garden that Sony has been sowing some discontent in for quite some time, I feel like. And it's finally now kind of burbling to the top. And maybe only so because there's no big blockbuster hit on the horizon that's supposed to be delivered in this generation. And it may feel like Ghost of Tsushima and The Last of Us Part 2, or that after those kind of Uncharted 4 in this past generation, that they've kind of hit a pinnacle of creativity, and now a lot of these things, right, are kind of coming to the surface.
I don't know. I think the one, like as you guys have discussed it, I've been thinking. You talk about like the sales numbers versus, well, like Sony Bend still didn't get maybe the love that the other studios got, and perhaps that's due to like the perception in the gaming media of the title. So if you don't provide that like prestige level of like just marketing or look, Sony wants to have that we want to be like HBO type thing. It doesn't matter if you sell well. They don't want mediocre sold well. They want it to look good too. But like in my head as I'm thinking that, was Guerrilla Games doing very well with what was the franchise that they had, the shooter
Killzone.
Killzone. Like I don't think that was lighting the world on fire. And then they got to just do what they're like we're just going to do something crazy, and they had that freedom. So like I think Agascas, you're right that there could probably be some like double standards at play, or for some developers I can see how they could see a double standard. Let's put it that way.
Yeah, this is just another one that came across, but also the shutdown of Evolution Studios. Again, one of their big driving game studios, the guys who did like MotorStorm and Moto versus ATX, those type of games, shuttered by Sony as well.
So I'll just say that.
I'm sorry, and the studio that did Drive Club was the other one. Sorry, go ahead, DJ.
I was just gonna say, as a longtime Sony Ben fan, all the way back to the original Siphon Filter, I don't know that they've ever gotten a lot of love, right? Like they made Siphon Filter, and then and they made a lot of Siphon Filter, and Siphon Filter is not HBO drama; it's USA action movie. So that's not bad, but they've always been kind of I don't know if they've been a B studio, but they've never been the kind of prestige studio within Sony's portfolio either. So
They're not Santa Monica.
Yeah, and I'm sorry, I really apologize for that, but I finally found the treasure trove that I've been looking for. So these are some of the studios. This is an article even back from like 2010. So this was in, the height of that PlayStation 3 generation, kind of the middle. So Game Republic, who did the Genji series, Folklore, Dark Mist, Toy Home. I don't remember them, but here's a big one: Incognito Entertainment, which did the Twisted Metal series, and Warhawk, right? Which during that generation was like a flagship title. For the PlayStation. Relentless Software, big studios who did Pursuit Force, Zipper Interactive, as I mentioned, SCE Studio Liverpool, who did Wipeout. Like that to me is kind of like how dare you close? Right? Like, again, Wipeout, flagship title for the PlayStation platform. Lightbox Interactive, which is Starhawk, Eat, Sleep, Play. This is a big one who did at least one of the Twisted Metal ones at some point. Maybe the whole Twisted Metal franchise. I'm not sure. And Superbot Entertainment. This is the big one. Superbot was the one that did PlayStation All Stars Battle Royale, which was their attempt to do their own Super Smash Bros, which didn't turn out very well. And because that was a big uh, you know spotlight play that everybody was looking at, when it didn't do well, that studio was shuttered. So
Any last Sony news before we pivot to Xbox? All right, so we're going to go with our resident Xbox expert extraordinaire, Towmaster 99, and he's got access to MLB The Show 21.
That's right. So we all know that MLB The Show 21 is coming to Xbox, and is it coming to PC too, or I can't remember. No, okay. But obviously, this was a Sony exclusive for the longest time now, and just last week they announced that MLB The Show will be on Game Pass day and date when it releases on April 20th. So that came as a super big shock to me because I was like, wow, I can't believe that they actually got that on Game Pass to come out. Not only on Game Pass, like, okay, maybe down the road I could have seen it come out, but on day and date when it's releasing with everything else. Obviously, Sony, PS4, PS5, Xbox One, and Xbox Series consoles. So I don't know. Did you guys think this would ever happen, that it would be coming to Game Pass like right off the bat? Swiss says no.
No, I was shocked by it. I mean, this is exciting. I was planning on pre-ordering it and buying it on Xbox to support the developers. I've enjoyed it on PlayStation over the last couple of years. I think the interesting part that's come out of this after that initial news is that MLB Studios is the one publishing on Xbox. It's not Sony. It's not Sony San Diego. And so whatever deal that was struck to put this on Game Pass was struck between Microsoft and MLB Studios. And I think, again, going back to a numbers game, I completely can see why Microsoft wants to make a splash with this. That this is, this is it's the first time that baseball, real, licensed baseball is back in a simulation since 2011 on Xbox, since the 2K series left. So I can see where it's going to make a splash, but I can also see from a publisher side that it gets it out there in a lot more hands than it might have, given the supply constraints around the Series S and X, and it also guarantees revenue. I think that that's probably part of it as well.
Was that back on the Xbox, the original Xbox, that it would have been? Or was
No,
that
360
early
had
360?
yeah,
Okay.
the 360 would have had the 2K games that had baseball.
Okay.
yeah,
I didn't know if it was.
the other ones I remember were EA's. Who I guess their last thing was the MVP baseball series, which the last iteration of was 2005.
Yeah, I forgot about that. Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. A little
So
bit later than I
great
thought.
news. I mean, it's good news for gamers, right? Very good news for gamers, regardless of the back end deals. That this is great for those on Xbox, and another
Yeah.
value to Game Pass.
Yeah, a big deal for me, just because I probably would have got it like down the line at some point eventually. But this is, I mean, I can just play it, boom, like right away. So it's been a long time since I played a baseball game, so it's gonna be pretty nice to be able to play this. Now I can chat with you and the guest, please, now, because you guys are always the big baseball guys. Because I was like, I don't have a PlayStation. I don't think Swiss play. I don't think you played it, right? Swiss, you don't play
I
MLB Show?
think we had like MLB 17 at one point, and then it got traded again pretty soon.
But you are a big baseball fan, aren't you?
I mean, yeah, I like baseball, so it hasn't. But it's, I don't know. I'm just not a big sports game playing. Like, it's just like I don't. I think the last time I really got into Madden was Madden 2003 when like Marshall Faulk was on the cover for the N64.
Right.
I mean, that's my and then the last basketball game was literally NBA Jam Tournament Edition for the Super Nintendo. So
Yeah.
it's just not something that I typically play unless it's like Mario franchised.
So the big sports franchises that I miss, and I think we've heard, I think NCAA is coming back to Madden as a sub mode in.
So it's not coming back to Madden. They've announced that they're developing a separate
Okay.
college football game.
No, that's great. I couldn't remember why I was so excited when I got it, because I used to play the NCAA games a lot, and I was very happy to hear it come back. But I didn't spend a lot of time when thinking about it when the story broke. But now I am thinking. I mean, do we know of any other franchises off the top of my head that are licensed properties that are exclusives to either Microsoft or Sony that could follow this pattern? I mean, because the tail of the tape here is, man, we've said a few times that we wish we were flies on the wall in the boardroom, but I wish I was a fly on the wall in the boardroom when this went down, because very clearly to me, and a lot of speculation, but very clearly to me, this was like MLB coming in and saying, "This is what's going to happen, Sony." Like, no argument. Like, no, like, this is what's going to happen. So I just wonder, if there's anything else out there that would, is at risk to that, to the holder of those rights for now, of following the same pattern.
I can't think of any other major league.
Are you talking sports or just anything in general?
Just anything in general, but to the consoles, right? Like, to a certain extent, I mean, this kind of is what has gone on with the Star Wars license, where Disney was like, "Yeah, EA, you're done having this as an exclusive. Like, you could still make Star Wars games, but we're farming this puppy out to other people."
Yeah, I think that's probably the closest comparison,
Okay.
right? Is that trying not to hold an IP all within one platform.
Yeah.
True story on baseball. I flunked a statistics test in undergrad because I forgot that we were having a test because I was too busy watching the 2004 Boston Red Sox run against the Yankees. So anytime I think about baseball and the Red Sox, and it's just really glad that that professor allowed us to drop one test grade if you did well on the final.
My question is, how in the world does watching baseball not prepare you for a statistics test?
Now it's just looking back, I question my studiousness because you're absolutely correct.
No, it's fine. Mathematical jokes typically fall flat on this show, so no worries.
I had much more fun in the class that taught me about the mathematics of cards and roulette wheels.
Yeah.
So
I did enjoy my business classes where I was able to do a case study on NVIDIA, so that was my academic crossover with gaming. But we digress.
yes, Tao, you stay on. You picked this story. Game developers doing nerdy things, but starting to break out into the world at large.
Yeah, so I just thought this was kind of a fun little story here. So, Homefront, the Revolution, and this article is on EGM. It's from the end of last week, actually, another last week article. The developer, or one of the developers at least, had hidden Time Splitters 2, basically a full remake, like 4K port of Time Splitters 2 within Homefront, the Revolution. So it was like an arcade game at some point. Arcade cabinet where you can go into, and I think initially there might have been like 2 levels from what I was reading on this article, or you can unlock 2 levels at some point. But then eventually that developer kind of lost, and then see, I'm trying to look for this guy's name, Matt Phillips. He kind of lost the codes basically on how to actually do it, and these are actually like kind of cheat codes you put in, right, bumper and all all this other stuff. He kind of lost the codes for this, and he thought it was lost forever. But of course, the days of the internet now, people are always messing with code and messing with games. So a couple of gentlemen or people, I should say. I don't know if they're both male. I believe they actually were able to dig up the code, and they in the article they actually list out like everything here. So it's like the full game now. You can unlock if you go in there and then do the set of sequence into your gamepad on PlayStation 1 and PS4 controller, and you can get like unlock the full game. You get the story mode, you get the arcade challenges, and then they had some other like unknown codes, and they just think that maybe cheats or like like extras or whatever, like maybe art or whatever, like, anything like that. So I just thought it was kind of a cool little article that sometimes the internet sometimes they can do good things out there and unlock stuff for people and in a good way, and not just like breaking down a game and selling it for money or something like that. So I just thought it was kind of a little cool article, and I don't know, maybe I'll actually pick up Homefront now, because Time Splitters was like one of my favorite games back in the day that I used to play on like the GameCube and with my friends and stuff. Multiplayer at least. I played the story. I might even beat like the first one. I'm not sure if I beat the second one, but it was just kind of fun, kind of a goofy game, and it would just kind of be interesting to see how this actually looked. I'm going from GameCube to like a 4K uh, uh, port here, so it'd be kind of cool to see how this turned out. So, any thoughts on this or comments?
It crossed my radar as well because of Time Splitters 2. I think I got it right back there up on the shelf.
Nice.
Still, so
I think the fun part about this story is that the cheat code was posted in a Discord server where the person
Yeah.
was banned because they thought he was lying about it. And so that's where they initially thought it was lost to time. But yeah, it's great that they discovered it again. So
I just also like the fact that it's like the old school cheat codes where you have to put in the button combinations, like LT up, LT up, down, just so it's yeah, it's kind of like a throwback from a bygone gaming era that the
Yeah,
kids
I
these
don't think a
days
lot of
don't.
developers. Yeah, a lot of developers nowadays don't want you to like mess with the game like that, like getting like God mode or unlimited ammo or stuff like that in their games for whatever reason. I don't know.
Really is a shame. Now we're getting the third remake or whatever it is of The Last of Us.
That's right.
All right. So, we're going to wrap it up with Nintendo news. Yay. Gascles stifled a bad comment, like a mean comment just now. You can see it.
I don't dislike Nintendo. I just use their platforms to play non-Nintendo games.
Well, we got plenty of non-Nintendo games for you tonight because they just had the Indie World Showcase Direct for April of 2021. And how many of you guys actually watched it? I did. All right.
I watched it after the fact. I didn't see it live.
All right. Yeah, same here. So I'll just put it out there. It's an indie stuff, so like if I throw out the names, it's probably not gonna be on people's radar. Was there anything in particular, DB and Tao, that you found especially interesting?
Anna Gascles.
I'm pretty sure, guys. I actually wish that we had the old format of Pix Plays where we like assign things to each other, because there's some games in here, like one in particular, that I would absolutely love to hear Gascles' thoughts on. So
Is that Road 96?
it is not.
Oh.
It is The Longing.
Huh.
oh, I am so interested in this game.
I am actually really intrigued.
I don't
by
know
this
that I'm
game.
ready to pay for $15 for it, but I'm very intrigued by it as well. Like the idea of how do you pass 400 days in real time? Yeah, sure, that's a thing.
I like the
Yeah.
idea. I'm sorry, go ahead.
So, Gascles, if you haven't seen the trailer yet, you're literally there's like a king who's kind of been like cursed or frozen or something. He's in this cave, and he will like revive or whatever in 400 days, and you're his last little minion servant guy, and you're just locked in a cave for 400 days.
You said this is The Longing?
Yeah.
Okay.
And it looks like even the movement and stuff looks methodical and rather slow. And I'm like, this can't actually be enjoyable, but it like the art style and just the concept, like they really have. I'm hoping that just the experience and maybe the story kind of embedded in the game makes it interesting. But yeah,
Well,
that
what would
was
be wild is if. Sorry, go ahead.
no, I was gonna say like just like a DB, like that one was intriguing. Like it can go so many different ways. Like it could be a complete face plant, or it can be really a different experience.
Yeah,
Yeah,
it'd
go
be
ahead.
wild if like after the 400 days, like it opens up to like an RPG or something. Like once your king actually awakes. Now this is real time too, right? This is like you have to play like each day. You're playing like each day, right, for 400 days or
The
something like that.
people, the hosts on the trailer did seem to indicate that you could see the ending. So they mentioned it somehow that made me think there's a way to fast forward, but
Oh,
I
okay.
don't know.
Okay, I must have missed that.
What I will say is just like perusing through here. What's very interesting is that so normally, yes, the do they call these the indie world?
They just called indie this
Okay.
time. I think before they used to.
Yeah. So look, I will admit I have a resistance or reluctance to expend a ton of my time watching the Nintendo Indie Direct thing, just mainly because of their main directs. Like there's so many times that I want there to be like. Unfortunately, watching a Nintendo Direct to me isn't like watching like an Apple keynote, right? Where steadily throughout the year, I always know that and feel like there's something big that's gonna come out. Like, so many times we have a Nintendo Direct and there's like no big, you know, I don't know. I'm trying to think of an analogy to say, and every one that I think of could come across as offensive, so I won't use it. But like, I expect some big like major announcement to come out that like rocks the world of the gamer. And it's so much like it only rocks your world if it's like specifically in your wheelhouse, like of a Nintendo franchise. So, and then the indie directs, like going back to like the Steam thing, like it's just really hard when there's like literally hundreds of indie games on the Nintendo eShop like every week, and it's like, how in the world am I ever supposed to discover anything here? But what I will say from perusing this list is it's very interesting how at this point in the Nintendo Switch life cycle, because we're going into the fourth year. Is it 2017? So is how many of these indie games are significantly above the line in terms of production value. So from what I would normally consider even an indie game on like a PlayStation or an Xbox console, um, I'm just really impressed by what I'm starting to see in terms of the variance of what people are bringing to the Nintendo Switch. And I wonder. I'm hoping we're getting past and beyond this. This impediment where, like, I mean, I know EA is bringing more games to the Nintendo Switch, and so um, I'm hoping that we're just starting to pass like a point where developers are more comfortable and confident about bringing like more, for lack of a better term, I apologize, more sophisticated games. I look at this Road 96 and it looks particularly interesting. It's not, a high performance game, but I am interested in like Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtle Shredder's Revenge showing up. This Last Stop looks interesting, which is kind of is, the narrative around this is the type of movie I like, which is, gosh, I can't remember the name of it now, but movies that tell like 9 different storylines, and then the whole point of the movie is like all of a sudden, like in the last 30 minutes, all those storylines converge, and like everybody shows up at the same place, like within minutes of each other, and gosh, I can't. There's such a great movie that I'm thinking of now that I can't remember, that had like Alicia Keys in it, and I'll look it up here in a minute. But this is set in modern day London. It's a bit of the supernatural to it, so So those things look interesting as well. So I don't know. In a year that I just don't know that we're going to get a Nintendo blockbuster, this may be the last hope. I don't know.
Yeah, especially since I just saw, I think Metro Prime 4 was just I saw an article today. Man, I can't remember. They had just like hired or looking for some kind of like digital developer or something like that for the game. It's like, whoa, I don't think this is going to be out anytime soon.
Oh,
As much as
man.
people keep saying it's going to come out this year, I don't even think it's going to come out in the next 2 or 3 years. So
I was literally about to say Metroid Prime 4 Holiday 2021.
yeah, I don't think so. I don't think so.
You poured cold water on it before I could even get out of it.
And Art of Rally, I'm very excited to see come to the Nintendo Switch.
Yeah, I was about to mention that one to you. Yeah, because I know you like the racing,
And that's coming
especially
in
like
Game Pass this summer as well.
Oh, is that
Art of
okay?
Rally is.
Yeah.
Yep.
But this is the exact type of game where even with it coming to Game Pass, I would be like super interested in having that in portable format and being able to take it with me, because it's the kind of thing I would just like sit down at like my in-laws, right, and kind of lose myself in, while everybody else.
Because you don't want to talk to them.
I look. I will engage with them speaking for a certain period of time, and then I just hit a point where look, I'm just not a great conversationalist. I just hit a point where like I have to be task oriented and like accomplish a thing. So,
I'll save you. I'll just say, Ali Ali World is another one of those that looks like it's a great way to, find some way to lose yourself in a game while there's a lot going on around you. So,
Yeah.
regardless of how you feel about who's talking around you, there is a benefit of some of these games that can do that on the Switch.
Smoking Aces, by the way, is the movie that I'm thinking about, which is like one of these converged timeline movies.
Yeah, that Ali Ali World kind of reminds me of not like gameplay or anything, more or less, but I was gonna say Drawn to Life, not Drawn to Life. What's the other one?
Scribblenauts?
Scribblenauts, where they kind of like had an idea where it's like, okay, we're gonna do these puzzles, and they had a couple of games like that. I think they did like a DC version of it, and then they like one of their last games or second to last games they've done. It's like an actually storyline and kind of like an adventure game. That's what Ali Ali World kind of reminds me of because it's like the first two, like I just got those like a month or so ago. Excuse me. It's just like a straight up skating game. And this one actually has a story where you like maybe some light RPG elements possibly from what it looks like. I know they kind of like making a whole story around it. So I thought that was kind of interesting and looks pretty cool too. And then a few others like Gascles mentioned, the Turtles one looks pretty good. The Ninja Turtles kind of throwback to the old arcade game. Aztec, where did it go? The Forgotten Gods, that looks pretty cool. Kind of adventure-ish, maybe Zelda-ish kind of, Breath of the Wild kind of game.
That's what I kind of took from it as well.
Yeah. Skull the Hero Slayer, that looked pretty cool, just kind of like another kind of adventure game. And then there's one more here. Never Yield, which it's just kind of like it's like a side scrolling, just like running game. Yeah, Auto Runner. But they actually have a demo for it, and I was playing a little bit of it earlier. It's actually pretty cool. I like the music too that they have going on in the background. So that one looks interesting. I might pick that one up once it comes out. And like the longing, like you said, you guys were talking about earlier. And speaking of kind of like the big reveal. They had Oxenfree 2 Lost Signals, which I never played the first one, but this one it looks gorgeous, this game. So I might go back and play the first one. I think the first one might be on Game Pass, or it was. It might come back on there.
Was, yeah,
Yeah.
but it's probably pretty cheap to pick up. But yeah, the art style looks very similar. And if that teaser interested you, definitely go back and play Oxenfree. It's a good story.
Yeah, I always heard it was a really good game. So yeah, definitely I'll go and pick that up.
So the log I'll throw on this fire is I'm sorry, you have more, Tal?
No, I'm good. Yeah, I'm good. Go ahead.
So the log I'll throw on this fire, and the thing that I feel like is kind of particularly interesting is I worry a little bit that in 2021, and if I didn't say it, the reason why this indie showcase may be even more important than the normal is we may not get anything in 2021 other than sequels. And they may be very few and far between in terms of big AAA blockbuster sequels. Because the weird thing that we're watching unfold just to see how it happens is my sense that I'm starting to get of development cycles and teams and people working remote is that what we got in 2020 was the last gasp of everything that was already in pipeline. And as we proceeded and went downhill and got through the delays towards the end of the year, by Cyberpunk, right, whatever was in pipeline had kind of been exhausted. And so what it looks like it was even harder to get done last year. As hard as wrapping things up that were already in pipeline were, it looks now like it was even more difficult to get anything started. And so I feel like anything that was like very, very early in pipeline and anything that was just getting started just did not come together in a way that yields and allows for a 2021 release. And so I don't know that we're getting anything big other than like the next iteration of Call of Duty, the next iteration of Battlefield, right, and Halo Infinite. Like, I guess we're getting the Diablo 2 remake. I don't think Diablo 4 will be out this year.
No, yeah,
I think, I mean, I agree with you. I think the only other caveat there is potentially some remasters that are relatively easy to spin up and polish.
We'll go back to the Sony article,
know,
right?
right?
Yeah.
Exactly.
it all comes
right.
back around.
Yeah. Everybody's making like incredibly safe bets now. And I'm starting to think like in the belief that we're going to go back to the new normal kind of towards the end of the year. And that will allow them to really, get back to some people in the studio, some people remote, right? And more of a rotation where really pulling off a new game, a new IP is more of a reality for them. I almost worry to a certain extent that we started this gear up to, all dev teams working remotely, and then maybe as teams started to think that we were going to come out of this, that they backed off of fully engineering and tooling around totally remote development, and so there was a pump your brakes kind of moment maybe. But games like this, like, it's going to be super interesting. I mean, 2020 was super interesting as it was going into the Game of the Year awards. This year, I think will be. I think if the distribution of games is an even smaller percentage of AAA titles, and a very large number of kind of indie titles, and maybe a smattering of like the mid game that had historically we thought had gone extinct. This could be another year that something like Goat Simulator, right, is like the the game is the game of the year or wins like a ton of awards, where there would have normally been AAA games gobbling up a lot of that airtime.
Do you put Deathloop in that AAA like top tier category
It's
as a new IP?
Again, I go back to like it being a super interesting year, right? Because was it 20? What Control won a lot of its awards, was that 2019?
Yeah,
like
2019.
So, and I have to go back and listen to the things we were saying at that time, but like Control is the type of game that I feel like so it was kind of the last full production year of that console generation, right? And so I don't know that Control would have won a ton of awards in another game cycle year. Like, it was very unusual. I mean, all applause to Remedy, but like not like the normal game that I would have thought. You're right, and we had a ton of delays. So, so Deathloop is Arcane Studios, right? Yeah. So Deathloop, Dishonored, Dishonored 2, and Prey, one of my favorite games of previous generation. Kind of like Sony Bend. I think they're a little better than Sony Bend, but that's just my opinion. have never gotten the love. Like, cultish niche kind of following, very staunch proponents. We feel like their games should get more like spotlight time, but just like don't. I kind of feel like Bethesda doesn't market them particularly well. So was Deathloop in Bethesda's pipeline before the purchase, and so it's also coming to a Sony platform? Yeah. But
Sony first.
There's a potential for it to win really big. The Will Smith movie that was kind of on the same fictional kind of material and storyline doesn't help. So hopefully it will break out beyond beyond that. But I want to say there's a certain element or percentage of it that's maybe a little sad in that, like, let's say Deathloop is big and does win a lot of awards. Um, there's gonna be the storyline and dialogue that it won because it's a soft year. And another thing, the last thing I'll throw out, we probably will need to go back and unpack at some point, because we already did our big decade uh, uh, decade analysis or whatever, but we kind of have now, what's starting to look like a fourth soft year, I think, that we've been saying that storyline. And so I kind of, maybe some rearward looking analysis to see if that, because I want to say since 2019, 2020, 2021, we've been saying soft year. 2019 because it was the last full production year of the console, 2020 because it was the last year of the console plus the pandemic, and now 2021, which looks like it's going to be an even softer year. What does that mean in terms of gaming history is kind of an interesting thing we may need to unpack at some point.
Well, when we have our year in review 2030, we'll have more answers perhaps. So, any last minute thoughts before we wrap this up?
One more thing. I just kind of echo what I guess because you were saying. It's like when I was watching this direct, I was like almost all these games that came up, I was like, oh man, this looks so cool. And just like thinking back on some of the bigger conferences from the bigger um, developers and publishers, it's just like, they've had the same thing. It's like maybe one or two new things, and it's just like I didn't feel like any excitement. I'm still excited for like Halo Infinite when it comes out, and obviously the next Call of Duty. And, Fortnite's going to keep going forever probably. And, I'm always going to play those games, but I didn't feel that excitement when they had those conferences like this one where it's like, oh, that kind of looks, Aztec looks good. Even the one, what's it called? Uh, the Beasts of Maryville Island, which just kind of looks like, just kind of a chill, like kind of, puzzly Animal Crossing and, or some other, type of just chill game that you can just do. It's just, I don't know. I just felt like I was more excited for all this stuff than anything else. And one game I forgot actually when I was scrolling through this list was Labyrinth City, Pierre the Maze Detective.
I
I
was
was like,
about to
wow,
mention that one too.
yeah, it's like there's so much going on screen. This is like, man, I can't believe this is actually
like
running on
a
Switch.
Where's Waldo game or something.
Yeah, there's so much detail in the city that they're in and all that. So yeah, that's pretty
It's
cool too.
it's fun to look at a game and be intrigued, but also know that it could be terrible, it could be awesome, but like you're going to be surprised. Like that
Yeah.
level of unknown is refreshing.
I know it's too late to put myself on the board for more 2021 predictions, but this is as you guys were talking, I'm thinking, man, this is the year that Square Enix comes off the bench and finally delivers like all the vaporware that they've been talking about since E3 2018, and they're just going to deliver this drove of games that they've been saying have been in pipeline and sweep all the awards. It's going to be all Square Enix.
That
Except we already know that the Forlorn or whatever the spoken whatever that one is that didn't have a title before is a 2022 game. So shoots that theory right there.
well, speaking of E3 and buzz, that's how we'll segue. Our next picks plays. So last week was coming off the news that E3's gone all digital. So for 2021, will this year bring the excitement of E3s of yore, or will it be more of the deadpan digital directs that we've seen each of the major manufacturers and many of the publishers become guilty of in the world of virtual? It's a toss-up, but to keep things positive, let's think back on those E3s of days gone by and visit a title that either brought us excitement when it was during its E3 reveal and coverage, the game itself, or just something related to it, game you played instead of it, a sequel or another game from the same developer, anything that draws your mind back to that E3 and the buzz you experienced from it. So we actually have 4 potential games already like filled in. So I guess Cleese, you may be continuing Star Wars Jedi Fallen Order from E3 2018. DB has Horizon Zero Dawn and Ratchet and Clank on the list. Tao has Titanfall 2, and I have Death Stranding. As always, these games are subject to change without notice. So for DBQ Hams, Towmaster 99, Agasicles Stamus, I am Swiss Guard. Thank you for joining us. Keep gaming. And we welcome you back next week when we talk what we've been playing for the GX show. Have a good night.